You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop.
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Back, Hockey Talk on the Rock for episode number 26 after our landmark milestone last week.
Woohoo!
Once again, we have no Canucks games to talk about as they're still going through the COVID crisis, but there's been some trades heating up as the deadline is 2 days away on Monday, and it is Saturday, April the 10th, I think, today.
Yes, you were correct.
So, it sounds like we're doing a bit of a both of us winging it episode today, but it'll be fine. And Laura, do you want to start off maybe with your thoughts on the COVID situation, or maybe Jim Benning's media availability a couple days ago?
Okay, so I'll start off with the COVID stuff because I feel like that's the more positive news this week, which is probably sad, but it sounds like as a group, the Canucks are getting better. The reports out of the team is that they've started to kind of turn the corner. And there's been no new positive tests for a few days now within the team. So that's a good sign. I mean, I'm not sure about like wives and girlfriends and kids and stuff, but in terms of the players, no more of them are like contracting the virus, and it sounds like most of them have started to improve on their symptoms, so all that is good. And the NHL is targeting the end of next week for the Canucks to be back on the ice. I still don't know if that happens. If it does, I think you're going to see probably a bunch of players from the taxi squad / Utica come and play a couple games. Utica's really interesting themselves because they had a COVID situation earlier this month and they haven't really played. So again, I feel like if they're still saying they hope the Canucks play 56 games, they kind of have to start playing at the end of this week, but it will be very fascinating to watch who's actually on the ice and how it goes. Jim Benning, going into him. I mean, I'll keep my comments for the Pearson thing in a bit, but
If there's nothing else about Jim Benning and media availabilities, he's consistent, if nothing else, right?
I feel like he must know how he comes off, and he might even lean into it a bit, because to go out there and just be like, oh, I don't foresee any cap problems this summer. Well, either he's not smart, which I'm going to give Benning the, benefit of the doubt. I think when you get to those positions, you have to have some sort of ability to manage. So maybe he does know something, and this is what I was saying. The rumors that I've been hearing lately is that Jay Beagle's injury is really bad and that he's going to basically be on LTIR now for the rest of his career, meaning that money is going to come off the cap. So if Benning knows that, and he knows, say, the Aquilinis have said, okay, you can buy out Eriksson this summer, which will save you $2 million or whatever, then that's freeing up $5 million in cap space right there. It doesn't excuse everything he's done, and it definitely doesn't, it doesn't, again, excuse the Pearson contract, basically, but maybe he does know something that we don't know. I'll give him maybe, again, a benefit of a doubt a little bit here, but I just can't believe how he comes off every time when he talks. And it's like, maybe the Canucks should hire like a publicist for him or something.
So, playing devil's advocate here, even if he knew that he got the okay to buy out Eriksson, or Beagle's money's coming off, or whatever, even if he knew all those things, is it still not the wisest thing to try and get better value out of a winger? Especially knowing
that signing for me is almost the last straw. It's not completely, but we talked about it a couple months ago. I said I'd be okay if they brought back Pearson. That was before he basically put up no points for, I think, a month. I know he didn't score for a very long time. He has 11 points this season. And to go on and on about how he's a Stanley Cup champion and all this stuff, like, yes, he won a Stanley Cup. He played on a good line when he won that Stanley Cup. But I don't think anyone will argue that Tanner Pearson is the reason why LA won that Stanley Cup. Like,
and it was also quite enjoyable for like the one random generality Benning put out there. Well, you know, players ages 24 to 34 win the cup. And it's like, well, that's a pretty big range for one. And you talk about Tanner Pearson being a cup winner. How old was he when he won the cup? He was 21.
Yeah.
So he's justifying his signing with these phrases that are contradictory to each other, all in the same like paragraph. It's real funny.
Yeah. And like, again, I know that Tanner Pearson and Bo Horvat specifically are very close. And I know that Horvat, like, when the signing was announced, he like released on Instagram, like, let's fucking go. Like, he was really stoked about it. So my thinking with Benning is that maybe he's too attached to his own players, which again, like, last summer, kind of the praise that we gave Benning was that he let Markstrom go, he let Tanev go. But what I wonder about with this situation with this team right now is because of COVID, like, if that might have played a factor here, because you knew that Pearson wasn't going to get moved. I did hear rumors that some teams had Pearson like higher up on their list than Hall because he would have been cheaper to get as a winger. But I don't think any team is going to trade for a player that they don't know what they're getting. Like, if he's going to be lethargic and not his normal self for 2 or 3 weeks or something, what's the point of trading for that guy? So maybe Benning was like, okay, well, if I can't trade him, I'm not going to recoup assets, then I've got to sign him. But it doesn't excuse the term and it doesn't excuse the dollars, right? Like,
No.
This summer, you know, there's going to be tons of players out there, like tons of probably top 6 wingers out there who could play the same role as Tanner Pearson that you could probably get for $1 million, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, if you wanted to re-sign Pearson, okay, I kind of get it. So keep him for another year, keep him on a cheap deal. And yes, he took 500,000 less or whatever than he's making right now, but it makes no sense every time I think about it. And the structure of the deal is awful. Like I was saying to you, it goes up, like the third year he's making something like 4.25 on the cap, which basically means that no one will trade for him and it's harder to buy out that deal. So again, when you have your Podkolzins and your Hoglanders who are gonna need more money and are gonna be filling in those spots that Pearson is now in, then you're just making life for yourself way harder. And on top of that, no, I had another thought about it, but now I lost it. I'll come back to it. But
Well,
yeah.
I mean, like last summer, we saw it last summer, right? When Anthony Duclair went from All-Star in Ottawa to signing for like 1.7 million in Florida. Like the wingers were taking the biggest cuts.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be, like you say, a bunch available. Where I think it ultimately comes down to Jim Benning and his lack of poker face.
Yeah.
And you could just see it as it was clear, and there was even hints from players too, in quotes they made, that like Tanev and Markey walking affected the room bigger than they expected. Yeah. And so as an unintelligent GM with a poor track record, you know, he's reactionary. And so now he's looking at Pearson as another guy that, you know, him walking would affect the room. And even more so in a way that it might go, you know, the room might go, they let those guys walk last year. Now they're letting Pearson walk this year. Like it might actually hurt the room a little bit more, even more. So, yeah. I mean, like, but again, the player is in a position of no leverage. So I understand you really don't want to lose the guy and the role he plays in the room and blah, 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 especially with what just happened. It's so fresh. But like, yeah, the money, the term, there's no way. And to say on the talk too, like, and we discussed with his agents and we agreed that this is what he'd be getting in the market if he went to market. It's like, well, of course the agent's going to tell you that.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing his job.
when a player goes to market, they're usually going to get a bit more than if they sign with the team that they're on, right? So why would you give them market value?
Yeah.
To begin with, the thing I was going to say is it reminds me a lot of the Sven Berchi deal.
And that's exactly what I thought as soon as he signed it. I was like, they gave him the spend deal.
Yeah, it's a little bit less money. I'll give him that. It's a little bit less, but it's just baffling that you've made all these mistakes. And again, they're all mistakes that you're still dealing with. And okay, you might get out of one or two this summer, and yeah, maybe you can bum or give Seattle one of those contracts by giving them something else. So you might be able to get rid of some money, but you've basically just replaced one of your problem contracts with another one that's going, if it's not already a problem, it's going to be one.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
yeah, it was, as I say, it's close to the last straw for me. The last straw for me is going to be if he messes up the Pedersen and Hughes deal. Like, now you've put yourself in a position where you have to bridge them, which I'm pretty sure you did before, so maybe it's not the end of the world. But the prioritization of signing Pearson is also the problem that I have with this whole situation. Forget, Pedersen and Hughes for 2 seconds. I would have been much happier if he'd gone out and spent this time trying to negotiate with Green and Clark, his coaching staff that are up. Like, deal with something else before what's gonna be your third line winger eventually.
Yeah, agreed. The timing of this was definitely strange.
But yeah, so Hughes, I'm pretty sure, is exempt from getting offer sheeted this summer. Pedersen is not. Obviously, the fear as a Canucks fan is that someone's going to come in and sign him for some, $10 million cap hit that the Canucks now can't match. But I'm not personally over worried about that yet. But it does put yourself in a position that you didn't need to be in by doing this signing before getting your big boys done, kind of thing. And I think it's a sign to Canucks fans with Benning making this deal and then the Demko deal last week, which again I thought was good, but he's made these two signings now. I'm pretty sure he's not getting fired. Like, obviously not this year, but there was some hope in my mind that maybe in the offseason they'd move in a different direction. I don't see that happening now. I think Benning is here for at least another year.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
It's like you say, he did some good work with Demko and very quickly undid the praise that he deserved for that. Let's quickly hop into some trades, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so we have 4 trades we can talk about since we last did our thing here.
Yeah.
And I'll throw to you on your participant ribbon and winner for the first one, which was the Islanders making the big move and getting Palmieri and Zajac for the rest of the year at half their cap hit, or half their salary or whatever.
Yeah.
And the Devils in return getting a couple AHLers, prospects, if you want to call them that, and then a first round pick and a fourth that might become a third. Thoughts?
So this is a big win for the Islanders. All the kind of like mock trade proposals that I saw about Palmieri going to the Islanders involved him alone for a first round pick and like Kiefer Bellows.
That's what I saw too, which is not good.
No, like not good, but it's a better deal than what they got, and they like for New Jersey, and they also had to give up Zajac, who was like one of their kind of glue guys in the locker room, and like they get a first round pick back in this draft, which, as we've talked about a lot, you don't know. It could work out to be a decent player, but right now it's a lottery ticket, and with Lee going down with injury for the Islanders, I think Palmieri is like a really good fit to fill in there, and then I think Zajac is good leadership. And basically for this team right now, like the Islanders, I think they're looking at the division that they're in. They're doing very well. They've got, Washington, Pittsburgh, and Boston looks like the teams that are going to make the playoffs with them. And I feel like this is Lou saying, okay, we're all in, we're gonna go, we're gonna try and win a cup here. And so I think it's a smart move. I like it for the Islanders. For the Devils, I think it's unfortunate. And I think it's a good precursor to see kind of what other teams like Buffalo can expect to get back for Hall.
Mm-hmm.
So I say big win for the Islanders here.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Big win for Islanders, ribbon to New Jersey. Ultimately, like you say, New Jersey in a normal year, you feel like would have gotten a lot more back in this deal. So it was a sweet deal for the Islanders. I agree. I think those guys are going to fit into the system really well. And Lamoriello has a history with both of them. He drafted Zajac, and I guess he scouted Paul Mary because he grew up in New Jersey or whatever.
Yeah.
So he knew them both, and so he knows what he's getting, which is good for them. And they do play a good. It's not as boring as people say it is. They do play a good brand of hockey, and they like Sorokin started the year shaky, but I think they might have possibly the best tandem goaltending this year.
Yeah, it's up there for sure. And both those guys that they just got just feel so much like Islanders, right? Like, to me, it makes 100% sense that they end up on the island.
Yeah, me too. And I would say the Islanders, that's probably it for them. That's their move, and they'll sit pat now.
Yeah, I agree.
Next trade was the Florida Panthers basically just unloaded Brett Connolly and a bunch of other things to clear cap space for what we assume is a precursor to another move.
Yeah.
So the Blackhawks ended up getting Connolly, Riley Stillman, the rights to Henrik Borgstrom, because I guess he's unsigned.
Yeah.
And a 7th round pick for Lucas Carlson and Lucas Wallmark.
Yeah.
So, like I said, not a very big return to Florida, but that wasn't the purpose. So,
I kind of think that I'd have to wait and see what Florida does now to almost grade this trade, because, like, for Chicago, there's no risk, right? Like, you're basically weaponizing the fact that you have cap room. Brett Connolly wasn't a good fit in Florida. He looked better when he was in Washington. Maybe he plays better in Chicago. Like, it's a low risk move for them. That Bjorkstrom kid is meant to be quite good. If they can sign him and turn him into something, maybe it's good. But again, before you know what Florida does, it's hard to say if they win or lose this.
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, I think it clearly goes to the Blackhawks. And like you say, it's just the creativity of weaponizing the cap space they have, mainly from LTIR this year, but moving forward as well, because Seabrook retired and all that. So low risk, good move, I think, for the Blackhawks. That'll give them the win there.
Yeah.
Next up would be yesterday. The Maple Leafs acquired the injured for the rest of the season Riley Nash for a 7th round pick. I'm actually going to give the win to the Leafs here because they're obviously banking on Nash coming back if they go on a late run.
Yeah.
He comes to the lineup in the whatever, let's say 2nd or 3rd round or something.
Yeah.
So for a 7th round pick, why not?
I agree with you. I feel like they must know something that we don't, along the lines of how injured he is. And a 7th round pick is very low risk to throw in there. The chances of that coming back to bite you are pretty low. So I agree. I give it to Toronto. We'll see what else they do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's unfortunate for Columbus to follow the playoff race because of these injuries. And like, he's a guy that they clearly, if he wasn't hurt, they would have dealt and got a better asset for. So
yeah,
bummer for them, but at least they got something, and at least Toronto has a chance to get something out of it too.
Yeah.
And then the last one, I think, was late last night. The Avalanche acquired depth D-man Patrick Nemeth and 50% of his salary or contract from the Red Wings for a 4th round pick next year.
Yeah, I mean, I probably give this to Colorado, but there's part of me that might say give it to Detroit. Again, Colorado's obviously loading up, especially on D, for what they expect to be a long cup run. And I think the stat is that like Tampa last year went to like their 8th or 9th defenseman in the final. So if you're planning on having a long run, you want to have guys that can step into the lineup and play. And so to me, it makes sense. A 4th round pick is, maybe for a depth demon a little bit high, but it's not something I would worry too much about.
Yeah, I'm same. I think I give the win to Colorado, but I mean, a 4th for Nemeth isn't too bad for Detroit either. So
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, that's the excitement.
That's the 4 trades, and like I said, there's it's the deadline Monday, so hopefully stuff happens, and we'll have more trades to go through on our next episode.
Yeah, I'll be I'm very interested to see what happens with Taylor Hall, because I feel like, Buffalo is asking for like a 1st round pick or whatever. I don't see them getting a 1st for Hall right now. I wonder if it's going to be like a 2nd and like a B grade prospect. And when you look back, just not to dump on Buffalo too much, because they've had a rough year. But when you look back in the summer, like, I really like the moves that Buffalo made. I named them as like a winner for free agency. But it's just gone to such a disaster. And like the Taylor Hall signing was one of those ones, right, that was like, oh, if he doesn't work out there and they don't make the playoffs, well, they'll flip him and they'll get something good for him at the deadline. But if they don't now, then this whole year has just been such a disaster. So
Someone will trade for him.
someone will, but I don't think they're gonna get what they want.
No, agreed. So before we move into the last couple pieces of news, since we're on the trade talk, I quickly want to throw out a couple names to you and get who you think is most likely to land them at the deadline, and then a dark horse.
Okay.
So we'll start with who you just talked about, Taylor Hall.
Okay, so I thought for a long time he was going to end up on the Islanders. I'm going to now go out and say I think he ends up on the Leafs. I think that when you've watched, like, in the last few games, when Nylander hasn't been in their lineup, you really realize they don't have much depth on their wings, and they're going to go all in, and they'll like, Buffalo's going to have to retain salary, right, to make it work, but I think that he ends up on Toronto.
I'm going to go throw me a dark horse.
Dark horse. Who has cap room? I'll say, I don't know if they're really a dark horse. I'll say Colorado. Again, I feel like depth on the wings. He'll fit on that second line quite nice.
Yeah, I like those. I'm going to go with, I think most likely he'll end up in Boston, because they've been talking all year about their need to have more scoring.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw out the dark horse of Minnesota. I think they're feeling good about this year.
Yeah.
And for the right price, I think they would do it.
Minnesota is very fascinating to me this year, like, for multiple reasons. Last night they played St. Louis, right, and they got absolutely spanked by them, like 9-1. And I think they have like 6 more games against each other. So that to me is going to be really interesting to watch how those two teams play against each other. But I agree, Minnesota is going to be an interesting team to watch at the deadline for sure.
Okay, I'm just going to do 2 more of these if you don't mind.
That's fine, yeah.
So David Savard is probably the highest ranked on the bait board on TSN or whatever for defense.
Yeah, I think David Savard ends up in Florida. It just makes too much sense with the Ekblad injury. And dark horse for him, Carolina. But I don't know if they're really a dark horse. They've been looking for a demon. So
I'm going to go with agreeing on you on the Florida thing. I think it's just the obvious, especially with the Ekblad thing. And dark horse, I'm going to say that Pittsburgh will land him, and that'll be Berkey and Hextall's first
big move.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so last one. The name that's kind of popped up more and more recently was, and you kind of touched on St. Louis. They're having an off year, and Mike Hoffman has popped up.
Yeah.
He's not having an awful year. Can you see someone making a move for him at his $4 million?
$4 million. Yeah, I could see that as well. And I feel like the teams are kind of like the same, right? I could honestly possibly see him ending up in Pittsburgh. I think he ends up somewhere in the East for some reason. I think almost Pittsburgh or Washington.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Montreal.
Okay.
Because of the Gallagher injury, they have some cap space for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And I feel like he would probably fit into their plans. And I think they were interested in him when they signed to Foley.
Yeah.
And then
Montreal that will be interesting to watch is like with Cole Caulfield, because they brought him up to the AHL.
I think he scored already.
Yeah, I think he's gonna pop right up to the NHL really fast here.
Yeah, he might.
Predicting with him.
And then I don't know, dark horse. I don't know, throw it to Carolina or something.
Yeah, I feel like all the teams that are in on wingers, right? Like Toronto, Colorado for me, and then yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I mean, I hope some stuff happens because every year it's a bit slow, but this year could be really slow. So I hope that some moves get made, and I hope that we have some stuff to talk about next week.
I think we will. Do you have any other news lines or storylines from the last week that you had hoped to touch on?
I don't think so. I think it was mainly just the trades and the Canucks stuff. Yeah. There's wonky scores getting a bit weird.
I know we touched on it last weekend, but the last thing I wanted to note on here before we call it a shift is Calgary and their continued struggles. And I think it's gotten to the point where not only the fan base and the media, but like the management has kind of realized that like this year is over.
Yeah.
And do you think we can see rentals, but not only rentals? Do you think you can see shakeups leading into Monday coming out of Calgary, or do you think that's more of a summer project?
I mean, traditionally speaking, it's more of a summer project, right? I think Calgary's in such rough shape right now that they'll consider anything. One of the rumors that I heard that I think is really interesting for both teams involved would be a Dahlin for Gaudreau swap of some sort.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that's interesting for both teams. But I think that Sean Monahan is more likely to be moved at the deadline than Gaudreau. I think there'll be teams that want those kind of first, second line wingers that will call about Monahan. So it wouldn't shock me to see him moved. I think Gaudreau won't be moved until the summer. And I know you talked about Giordano. I feel like there are other defensemen out there that are younger and don't have term left that you can go after. But again, there's probably going to be people calling on him. He does have a lot of experience and he is like the leader of that team and he can still put up points. So I'm sure people will call. But I kind of expect, like if Sam Bennett gets moved, that's not big news. If Backlund gets moved, it's not really big news. It's going to be one of those three that get moved that would be like a big shakeup for the team, right?
Yeah, because he has the no move, I don't think that matters so much, but I think because he has one more year at nearly $7 million, I think if Giordano does get moved, it would have to be like this time next year after another disappointing season in Calgary kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think Gaudreau will go, but it'll be a summer thing. I could see Monahan maybe going at the deadline, but I think, like you said, it'll be more like Sam Bennett and Dave Rittich and stuff like that.
And I mean, like going on like Toronto rumors, I could see Dave Rittich ending up in Toronto right now with their injury to Anderson. And then obviously Jack Campbell's played really well for them, but you don't know how long that's going to go on for. And to have that depth in the playoffs, I could see him ending up there. But again, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be a fascinating one. I think more so than years before, just because it's so hard to predict if anyone's going to move.
Yeah, it's true. Well, we're, what are we, almost 48 hours away from the deadline. So
yeah, exciting times.
By the time we talk next Friday, potentially, stuff will have happened. You have to assume some things will happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then by then we should also know are the Canucks going to be playing next weekend or not too. So it's going to be, we'll have things to talk about next week. It's kind of exciting to look forward to, and
Yeah.
short episode this week. It is what it is.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Alrighty, well we did it. We talked about hockey, and things were said, and we put out some potential ideas of what we think might happen in the future. So we'll find out if we're right or wrong, and tune in next time. Thanks for listening.